Imagine waking up one day, and no one can see you anymore. You talk, you shout, you cry, and the world simply passes you by as if you were made of glass. This is not fiction. This is already happening to millions of people. And the worst part is, it could happen to you. Today I want to show you what really happens when society makes a collective decision to erase you. It's not just about feeling alone. It's about what it does to your mind, your worth, and the very fabric of society. Stay with me until the end, because the last point will make you rethink the way you look at the people around you. If this video made you feel something, don't ignore that feeling. Leave a comment below. Who do you feel is being invisible today? Or who might you be ignoring without realizing it? Subscribe, turn on notifications, and come reflect with me on what really matters. Stopping being a ghost in other people's lives and in other people's lives. Imagine you walk into a crowded cafe. You order a coffee, pay, and sit down. Nobody looks at you. Nobody responds when you try to start a conversation. The waiter hands you your cup without making eye contact. You speak louder. Nothing. Gradually you realize people aren't avoiding you. They simply don't register you. You become background noise. This is the essence of social invisibility. It's not active rejection. It's passive erasure. Being hated still gives you existence. Someone expends energy to attack you, criticize you, block you. Indifference, on the other hand, is much more cruel. It says, without using words, you don't alter my reality, therefore you don't exist. In practice, this happens in layers. First, on a micro level, unanswered messages, invitations that never arrive, glances that pass you by on the street. Then on a medium level, colleagues who forget you in meetings, groups that leave you out of WhatsApp, social media where your posts die with 2 likes, one of them yours. Finally, on a macro level, systems that exclude you, public policies that don't see you, companies that don't hire your profile, media that doesn't tell your story. Have you ever noticed that when someone important doesn't reply to your message, your first thought isn't, that person is busy, but rather, I must have done something wrong, or I'm not interesting enough? This automatic mechanism reveals an uncomfortable truth. A large part of our self-esteem isn't built from the inside out. It's borrowed from the outside. When society systematically chooses to ignore you, that loan is cut off. No one validates your ideas. No one laughs at your jokes. No one seeks you out of vent. The collective silence becomes a cruel mirror reflecting. You don't matter, and the brain, desperate for coherence, begins to accept this narrative as truth. First comes a fleeting doubt. Did I overreact? Then comes constant self-criticism. Maybe I really am annoying/inconvenient/unattractive. Over time, the doubt turns into certainty, and the certainty becomes identity. I am someone who doesn't deserve attention. Psychologically, this is devastating because self-esteem functions like an emotional thermostat. When external recognition disappears for an extended period, the thermostat is recalibrated downwards. You start accepting crumbs of attention as if they were banquets. You begin to settle for toxic relationships just to feel that someone sees you, or you withdraw completely, thinking that the problem is you and that the world is better off without you. How many times have you felt less than just because one of your Instagram stories had 0 views? Or because a close friend disappeared without explanation? These daily micro-erasures gradually erode the foundation of your self-image until, one day, you look in the mirror and truly no longer recognize the person you used to consider yourself capable, interesting, and worthy. The collapse of self-esteem doesn't happen with one major trauma. It happens drop by drop, silence by silence, like not given by like not given. And when the bucket finally overflows, the damage is already profound. You not only feel invisible, you start to believe you are unworthy of being seen. The most dangerous aspect is the psychological effect. The human brain is designed to exist in the gaze of others. When this social mirror disappears, the person begins to doubt their own reality. Did I speak loudly enough? Am I annoying? Do I even deserve attention? The most painful question isn't why am I being ignored, but am I really here? Being invisible hurts more than being rejected because hatred recognizes your presence. Indifference erases you from a human map. And when millions of people are erased at the same time, the entire society begins to lose pieces of itself. It's not a person who wakes up and decides to ignore you. It's a much more powerful mechanism, collective silence. It doesn't need a meeting, a prior agreement, or a leader. It's enough that each individual, out of convenience, fear, laziness, or discomfort, chooses to look the other way at the same time. And that's it. You disappear. This phenomenon is frighteningly efficient because it leaves no trace of individual guilt. No one feels like the villain. I didn't do anything against him. Everyone thinks. I just didn't do anything for him. And in this collective, I did nothing. The most complete erasure that exists is constructed. Real-world examples abound. The colleague that everyone knows is suffering from burnout, but nobody asks how they're doing because there's already so much going on. The friend who stopped posting and disappeared from conversations. Everyone notices, but no one reaches out. The neighbor keeps yelling for help, and the whole street pretends the sound is from the TV. The profile on social media that was active suddenly goes silent. Followers notice, but the algorithm and social inertia take care of the rest. Collective silence reveals our almost instinctive obedience to group indifference. We are trained to follow the flow of the majority. If no one reacts, reacting would be exaggerated, dramatic, invasive. So we remain silent. And collective silence becomes a sentence of invisibility. What's most disturbing is realizing that this mechanism doesn't discriminate. It can affect the unemployed, the elderly, the immigrant, the introvert, the depressed, the different one, the one who messed up, even you. All it takes is for the group to decide. Without actually deciding, at some point that investing attention in you isn't worth the emotional cost. When silence becomes collective, it ceases to be the absence of sound. It becomes an active force of exclusion, a silent, polite, democratic violence. And the worst part, it almost always works because almost no one feels responsible. First comes sadness, a quiet, almost polite sadness. You still try to justify it. Maybe they're busy. Maybe I was being inconvenient. It will pass. Then comes a confusion. Why doesn't anyone notice? Why doesn't anyone ask? The brain spins and loops searching for a logical explanation for the silence. And then, without warning, anger explodes. It's not a clean anger, directed at someone specific. It's a dirty, diffuse, hot anger that burns inside, without a clear target. Anger at the friend who disappeared. Anger at the family that pretends everything is normal. Anger at the boss who never praises you. Anger at the algorithm that buries your posts. Anger at the street that passes you by. Anger at the mirror that keeps showing you a face nobody wants to see. And, above all, anger at yourself for still caring. This anger originates from emptiness. When you are constantly ignored, the brain interprets it as a threat to social survival, and the primitive response is fight. But there is no visible enemy to fight. So the energy turns inward, self-destruction, or outward in an uncontrolled way, sudden outbursts, corrosive sarcasm, acidic comments on social media, or even impulsive behaviors that later generate more rejection. The most dangerous thing is that this anger doesn't disappear when someone finally notices you. It has become accustomed to the taste of emptiness and starts to distrust any attention. Now that I'm down, they come. Where were they before? It becomes armor. And those who live in armor end up forgetting what it's like to live without it. This anger isn't just directed at those who ignore you. It's anger against a world that allows, normalizes, and even rewards mass indifference. It's anger at existing in a system where disappearing is easier than being seen with all your flaws. And that's where the cruelest cycle begins. The more anger, the more distance. The more distance, the more emptiness. The more emptiness, the more anger. We are who we are because someone recognizes us as such. A baby learns it is a baby when its mother smiles and calls it by name. A child discovers it is funny when its peers laugh. An adult feels competent when the boss praises them or the client thanks them. This social mirror is so essential that, without it, identity begins to unravel like sand through one's fingers. When society ignores you for an extended period, the mirror disappears. No one calls you by name with affection. No one reacts to your achievements or your pain. No one positions you within any collective narrative. You continue to exist biologically, But the part of you that is me as seen by others collapses. Without constant external feedback, the internal narrative becomes a lonely echo. You start to wonder, am I really that funny, or did I just think I was because someone laughed? Am I good at what I do, or did I only think that because I received compliments? Am I important to someone, or was that an illusion? Loss isn't dramatic, like in a movie. It's slow, silent, corrosive. You stop telling certain stories because it's no fun anymore without an audience. You stop wearing certain clothes because nobody will notice anyway. You silence opinions because why talk if nobody listens? Little by little, you cease to be multiple versions of yourself until only a neutral, minimal shell remains, barely daring to express itself. We are social beings to the core. Taking away someone else's recognition is like taking away gravity. The body is still there, but nothing holds up properly anymore. You float in a vacuum of identity, without an anchor, without a defined outline. And the saddest part is, many people reach the point of preferring to be hated rather than remain invisible, because at least hatred gives back a form, a place on the other person's emotional map. Without a social mirror, you don't die. You simply stop knowing who is alive inside. Dehumanization doesn't arrive with fanfare and flags. It arrives slowly as a habit. First, we ignore the homeless person looking away, quickening our pace, pretending that the person there is just part of the urban scenery. Then we normalize ignoring the unemployed person who asks for help in the family group chat. We've already helped so much. Next, the immigrant, the disabled person, the elderly person alone, the different young person, the person in mental crisis who posts passive-aggressive messages, until a habit spreads and becomes an unspoken rule. If the majority ignores, ignoring is acceptable. What begins as selective indifference becomes general indifference. And when indifference becomes normal, dehumanization ceases to be the exception and becomes a system. The ignored person is no longer someone who is suffering. They become someone who doesn't try hard enough, someone who exaggerates, someone who is annoying, someone who doesn't belong. The collective brain rewrites. It's not that we are ignoring a person. It's that this person doesn't count as a real person. History teaches this with brutal clarity. All great mass violence began with the everyday practice of looking the other way and pretending not to see. Ghettos, camps, genocides, modern slavery, none of them arose from nothing. They arose from millions of small acts of normalized dehumanization. It's not my problem. I can't do anything. Everyone does it this way. Today, the mechanism is more subtle, but equally effective. We ignore stories about depression. We only like happy photos. We scroll past cries for help. We disable notifications from the difficult person. Each gesture reinforces. Some lives deserve attention. Others do not. And the cycle closes when you yourself join the line of those being ignored. Then you realize the society that trains you to ignore others today will train you to ignore it tomorrow too. Because dehumanization doesn't choose sides. It just waits for its turn to become a universal rule. The body remains in the world. You still walk down the street, sit on the bus, work at the same desk, sleep in the same bed. But the mind is being pushed into an invisible cell, brick by brick. First, physical isolation sets in almost silently. You stop going out as much because you have no one to go with. You accept fewer and fewer invitations because rejection hurts more than loneliness. You start doing everything alone, grocery shopping, movies, short trips, eating out, until the habit of being alone becomes the only comfortable option. Then comes psychic isolation, the deepest and most silent kind. You remain surrounded by people, but the emotional connection dies. Conversations become internal monologues. You hear the other person speak, but you no longer feel part of the exchange. You look into their eyes and see a mirrored emptiness. The sensation is like being behind thick glass. You see the world, you hear the sounds, but nothing truly penetrates. This double isolation creates a cruel paradox. You could be physically surrounded by dozens of people and at the same time feel more alone than ever. It's the kind of loneliness that can't be explained by a lack of friends. It's existential loneliness, the certainty that no one is truly there with you, within your experience. The brain reacts as if it were in constant danger. Vigilance, distrust, and hyperanalysis of every interaction or lack thereof. increase. The mind closes itself off in layers of protection. Sarcasm, cynicism, prolonged silence, or a false, superficial extroversion that only further exhausts the mind. The greatest punishment of invisibility is not the absence of company. It's realizing that company can exist all around you, and yet you remain completely alone. It's living within a crowd that never reaches you. It's carrying a scream that no one hears, not even when you're screaming inside. The worst poison of invisibility doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within after the external has already done the initial damage. The more you are ignored, the more your brain starts producing a convenient and cruel explanation. If nobody sees me, it's because I don't deserve to be seen. If nobody answers, it's because my words are worthless. If nobody stays, it's because I'm the common problem. This line of reasoning doesn't appear overnight. It builds slowly, like drops falling on the same stone, until it forms a whole. Each unanswered message, each unviewed story, each rejected or unmade invitation reinforces the same internal narrative. I'm not enough. I never was. And now it's becoming obvious to everyone. The cycle then closes. 1. You feel invisible. 2. Interprets as evidence of low value. 3. Age less, talk less, take fewer risks so as not to bother anyone anymore. 4. It receives even less attention because those who don't show themselves become even more transparent. 5. The interpretation strengthens. See? I'm really worthless, and returns to step 1, only deeper. The most tragic thing is that this self-deprecation becomes a survival mechanism. You start punishing yourself before others do. You anticipate rejection with self-loathing. You become the first and most merciless judge against yourself. And then the damage becomes twofold. Others ignore you out of indifference or distraction, but you end up ignoring yourself out of conviction. You stop taking care of yourself, defending yourself, valuing yourself. He accepts crumbs as if they were the most he could hope for, or he simply gives up trying, because why bother if in the end it always ends like this? The cycle of self-deprecation transforms the indifference of others into an internal judgment, and when that happens, even if someone sees you again someday, you may have already learned not to believe in your own reflection anymore. There comes a point where the collective silence, the accumulated invisibility, and the cycle of self-devaluation exert so much pressure that the human being only has 2 real options: to explode or to implode. A rebellion, it arises when anger born from emptiness finally finds direction. It is not necessarily violent in a physical sense, although it can be. Often it is a creative, verbal, existential rebellion. The person who was once silenced begins to shout too loudly on social media, to openly confront, to create corrosive content that exposes a system. Others became activists, radical artists, disruptive entrepreneurs, or simply broke the script of the life they were expected to follow. Some people turn pain into fuel. If you don't see me, I'll make sure you can never look away again. A surrender, on the other hand, it's the path of total erasure. It's when a person accepts their internal narrative as the ultimate truth. If I don't exist for them, then I really don't exist. They withdraw, diminish, disappear. They stop posting, going out, trying. Many reach extreme isolation, professional abandonment, profound apathy, chronic depression, or, in the most serious cases, sad statistics that no one talks about. What determines which path will be taken? It's not always willpower. Often it's what little support remains, even if minimal, a spark of belated external validation, internal resources accumulated before collapse, or simply the luck of crossing paths with someone who breaks the cycle at the right moment. History is full of examples from both sides. Ignored people who became revolutionaries, censored writers who changed the world, outsiders who exploded into genius, and also millions who silently surrendered, becoming numbers in mental health reports, suicide, abandonment. Ultimately, the choice between rebellion and surrender is not just personal. It's a silent judgment on the society that allowed things to get to this point, because every person who surrenders is a collective failure, and everyone who rebels is an uncomfortable reminder that the system is not infallible. We've reached the final mirror, the most unsettling of all. Up to this point, we've talked about what happens when society decides to ignore you. Now the question turns from the inside out. What if the biggest problem isn't being ignored, but how actively do we ourselves participate in a mechanism that ignores others? How many times have we walked right past someone who clearly needed a high? How many messages for help have we seen and thought, I'll reply later, and never did? How many stories of venting have scrolled past and become last seen? How many times have we only liked the happy photos and ignored the indirect messages from those who are struggling? How many times have we said, it's not my problem, when it was exactly our problem? Collective indifference isn't an abstract monster that falls from the sky. It's made up of tiny individual choices, repeated millions of times. Convenient silence, hurried scrolling, let it go, fear of engagement, emotional laziness. Each of these microgestures contributes to the same system that, one day, could swallow us all up. The most dangerous thing is not when we become victims of invisibility. It's when we become complicit in it, without realizing it, because the mechanism is the same. Today we ignore the other to spare ourselves discomfort. Tomorrow the other or the group ignores us for the same reason. It's a cycle that we all feed. The real turning point happens when we stop asking only what happens when I'm ignored, and start asking, what happens when I ignore? How many people around me are feeling like ghosts because of my silence? How many lives have I unintentionally erased just by go with the flow? Perhaps the most revolutionary and painful question isn't about being seen. It's about ceasing to be the kind of person who contributes to others not being seen. Because the society that ignores it isn't them. It's us. And it only changes when each one of us decides to stop being part of the problem. If this video made you feel something, don't ignore that feeling. Leave a comment below. Who do you feel is being invisible today? Or who might you be ignoring without realizing it? Subscribe, turn on notifications, and come reflect with me on what really matters. Stopping being a ghost in other people's lives and in other people's lives.